This episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by the LSA Group, the new high-end, high-value speaker standard, and also Core Power, state-of-the-art power at real-world prices. Today's episode is also brought to you by Qobuz, lossless and high-res streaming and downloads. 50 million tracks in all genres in the best possible quality. Qobuz supports the audio industry and appreciates the needs of discerning audiophiles. Try it for free now at Qobuz.com. That's Qobuz.com. Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today on the Occasional Podcast, Season 4, Episode 4. Depending on when you hear this, the world is enwrapped in COVID-19 outbreak, which has successfully canceled all of the audio shows in the United States. And I was actually just thinking of a time when I used to go to the audio shows and enjoy myself very much. One of the contributing factors to those wonderful experiences was the company that we're interviewing today called MBL. They're out of Germany. They're a very high-end system, but they usually have a very cool experience on the first floor of any audio show. They're one of the companies that's lucky enough to have the budget and the technology and the wherewithal to have a big, showy room at almost any audio show. You can find them, and they're fancy. You know, the systems can cost up to $500,000. But after doing this interview, I found out they actually have systems that are a little bit lower, you know, kind of a mid-tier, $10,000 floor standard kind of range, and I believe they have some bookshelves that are around the $10,000 to $15,000. But the one thing I want to impress upon you when you listen to this is that they're different. They kind of stand out among a lot of the paper cone in a box makers out there, and the technology is an omnidirectional technology that looks like different. It sounds different. It is just a truly unique kind of experience when you're in the room and a unique product. The caretaker of these showrooms is a gentleman by the name of Bryan. And Jeremy was nice enough to join us on the interview today to kind of take us through what the company's about, where they're from, and kind of how he takes care of the room individually, because he's a very tidy guy and it pays off in the listening experience. So please join us, Bryan from MBL. I also want to add one thing before we go right into the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Macintosh Laboratory. Since 1949, Macintosh has offered distinguished quality home audio products. Still handcrafted in Binghamton, New York, the iconic Macintosh Blue Watt meters are globally recognized as a symbol of quality audio. Bring your music to life with Macintosh. Visit Macintosh Labs to learn more. That's MCINTOSHLABS.com. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining a very special guest, Bryan from MBL. One of the wow factors at any audio show, MBL. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Brian. Thanks. Good to be here.
So, one of the things that I love about MBL is that they are aspirational. I'm going to start off by saying that for a lot of people, but in a very, very fulfilling way, in that the sound is almost always impeccable, and it utilizes technologies that are unusual compared to usual box and driver, paper cone driver kind of designs. So part of this episode is going to be Jeremy talking about the company, but also talking about the technology that is very unusual and also is quite costly. But this is one of those instances where I think the ends justify the means, because it always is. How much time do you actually spend setting up at a show?
I'm a little bit over the top on that, as you may have heard. I try to get to the show as early as I can, even if it means I have to pay the hotel extra to come in a day or 2 days even early before the setup day. So I'm there till the last possible second. I represent some pretty amazing products, as you said, and I really want to give them the best possible light to be shown in. I do everything that I can, try not to make excuses for the room or anything else. So I'm there till the wee hours. I don't sleep very much at these shows.
Well, it pays off because you always have the biggest show. It's always in a great traffic room. It's like you are crushing your job as presenting these speakers. Because,
thank you.
Because the the rooms are always. In fact, I feel like the rooms even have the same aesthetic when I go in every time. It's like, it was my home away from home. I just could hang out there all weekend. Let's talk about the product line that you guys have in terms of, let's start with, the company does make, the end drivers all the way through all the electronics, right? You guys make everything.
Correct.
Let's start with the product line of transducers, of the actual speakers. How does it go? How many products, and is there anything that's a little bit on the lower end that's more attainable for the average man?
Yeah, with MBL, the core of the technology was the invention of this radial omnidirectional tweeter. And the concept was patented in 1979 by the founding engineers of the company. MBL is an acronym for the last name of the three founding engineers, Maletsky, Bianica, Lenhart. So they achieved a patent, U.S. patent in 1979 for this driver concept. It took about 6 years of intensive R&D, and the original inventors could not get it off the paper and actually functioning. Oh. So they hired a genius engineer, young engineer named Jürgen Reis, and he's been with the company since about 1983, and it's the only job he's ever had. He designs everything. So with that in mind, the tweeter and then the mid-range evolved shortly thereafter with the same operating principle. So this tweeter and mid-range combination is the core of the MBL line, and it is available on all 8 of the loudspeakers that we make. Okay. Starting with our MBL 126, which is our smallest loudspeaker. It has the same tweeter and mid-range all the way up the line to the 101 Extreme.
Really? It's the same mid-range and tweeter for everything.
Yes.
I think that speaks pretty good for the stuff down at the opposite end of those big, gorgeous guys you bring to the show. So that's really fun.
Above 600 hertz, the loudspeakers are all behaving the same way, even the most compact to the largest. So most of the music, certainly vocal and higher frequency instruments, above 600 hertz. So if you can be fooled very easily, and I have done this at shows where I've physically placed the smallest speaker in front of one of the larger ones, and people have to really think about which one is playing.
That's really fun. And then you guys can't see, but Jeremy did bring a example here, and the ring, it's called the ring radiator, you said, right?
Radial Strahler is what we call it. It's they're pulsating spheres. They're spherical drivers.
So the driver itself, if I can just describe this for you guys visually, is actually comprised of a couple of bands. What is the material that is vertically aligned?
The drivers are different shapes and sizes depending on the frequency range that they're optimized for, but they all work on the same principle. So, for example, the tweeter has these 24 individual segments, these little black stripes that you see fixed around this voice coil.
And they're vertically aligned, right?
Yes.
Like a melon, but vertically aligned pieces of material in a
sphere.
In a sphere. It's a sphere, yeah.
Yeah. So the voice coil is at the bottom, and each one of these individual segments is independently connected to the same voice coil. And then at the top, they're all independently connected to a thrust bearing. So the voice coil fires vertically with the music signal. It forces the segments to bend all the way around in phase at the same time. So it's putting the same tone and pressure evenly distributed in the horizontal plane, but also you can see each of the drivers has a very specific curve to it. So it's firing up, down, all around the room. So what this achieves is it puts a very natural balance of tone and pressure in the room. So we're trying to mimic the way that we hear naturally, which is always a balance of direct sound and reflected sound. In the concert hall, over half the sound can be reflected sound. So this technology is allowing you to hear the initial impulse of direct sound and then reverberations milliseconds later of the same information in phase. So it really gives you this sense of space and dimension to the music. And it also allows you to not be locked into a tight sweet spot like you would have with the conventional forward-firing loudspeaker.
I guess the biggest mystery to me is how something that fires like this can have, and this is true in almost every example you've done at a show, how can it have pinpoint accuracy for focus of the instruments in a soundscape when it's so different from the traditional two beams shooting at your head? It seems like it almost wouldn't work, but it does. It's holographic in its delivery, just like you would expect from any good hi-fi. But it's like shooting in all directions, so it's a kind of a mystery to me how that's possible, but it does work.
Yes, I'm not an engineer. I have a long history with this company and with hi-fi, but I can go shallow into that explanation. I would steer you to our YouTube channel because Jürgen Reis, this chief engineer I was describing, who's responsible for all MBL products, he goes into extensive detail on how the technical parts work, and more importantly, psychoacoustically. That's a lot of the research that's happened at MBL since the early 80s is a psychoacoustic to understand exactly the principles and the mechanisms that you're describing. So simply put, you can see here on the mid-range driver, for example, there's a segment that is in the middle of the driver.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And on the 101, which has the omnidirectional woofer, is this large silver driver you see. It's kind of the iconic piece of the company.
Right.
There's a segment in the middle also aligned with this one, and the subwoofer, the bass modules always have an acoustic center. So there is a center rod that runs straight through the entire system. Okay. So it is a point source. So that is part of what you're experiencing. Also, we get the initial impulse from these first segments. The initial impulse comes from the first beam that you get in your brain. And then the way our hearing works, we compress for a few milliseconds to process the information that we've just received. And this goes back, to evolutionary history, localization cues, what's behind you, what's in front of you, these kind of things. So this is what we get from the initial impulse, and then you're hearing reverberations of the same information coming milliseconds later. So as you can move around the room, one of the popular features of the MBL sound is that you can move around the room and have a very good experience. For example, last night we had an after-hours event where we played some quarter-inch analog tapes from one of our partners, United Home Audio, and there were 25 people in the room from corner to corner, front to back, and everybody had a great aural experience because as you move around the room, you're just getting a different set of these pedal segments giving you the initial impulse. So this is kind of creates this nice trick that you still have a stable center image and a sound stage similar to nature. If you're sitting left of the stage, you hear the left instruments a little bit dominant, and same with anywhere else in the room relative to the players.
I think that's a pretty good explanation. I get it. So each beam shoots out, and you're receiving that one first. It's not you're not getting a massive blur. You're receiving one set of information from each thing as you go around, and it's not just shooting out in all directions in that respect.
It works very much like a conventional speaker in that respect. You do get the initial beam. But because of the way the drivers are firing, you don't get this harsh kind of beaming that you get with a conventional cone and dome type loudspeaker. And this tends to be very fatiguing to listen to over time. Yeah. And what's beautiful, one of the beautiful things about the MBL is that you will not get fatigue from listening to this loudspeaker when it's properly set up. You can listen for hours and hours and no ringing, no headaches, more exciting, and you want to keep listening more rather than I've had enough and it's wearing me out.
I would agree with that. I don't think I've ever experienced massive fatigue coming out of your room. Now, this unit, what is the base model? What would you consider the base model that still incorporates this driver unit available?
That one's called the MBL 126. It is a 3-way loudspeaker. It has the radial tweeter and mid-range that is found on all the loudspeakers, and then we're using a hybrid bass system for the 4 smaller loudspeakers. So they're using conventional cone type drivers, but in an unconventional way. They're mounted to the sides of a pyramid-shaped cabinet, and they fire together push-push. The baskets are connected inside with rods, and they fire push-push. So they're canceling each other's negative energy, but you also have 180 degrees radiation on one side of the pyramid and 180 degrees radiation on the other side. So we're able to stitch this together in the crossover, so the timing and the balance of the frequency is very natural.
And what do you get as you move? So the unit that I see most often is the 2 that you is that correct?
The 101.
Oh, sorry, the 1.
Yeah, the 101E Mark II. That's yes, that's the sort of the iconic loudspeaker. That was the original speaker from the company.
Oh, okay. And what do you get when you step up to that as opposed to the model we were just talking
the
about?
126 starts at $11,800 retail per pair. So when you step up 4 steps to the 101E Mark II, you don't have this hybrid bass system anymore. You have an actual omnidirectional midwoofer. That's what the large silver driver is.
Midwoofer,
with much bigger segments. That driver plays from 100 to 600 hertz approximately. The mid-range is playing 600 hertz to 3.5 kilohertz approximately. And then in the 101, it is a 4-way. There's a down-firing woofer in the sub cabinet, in the bass cabinet of the Omni system.
That's a typical dynamic driver, that one?
It's something like a 12-inch driver. It's in a band pass. It's sealed at the back of the cabinet and fires down and then vents at the front. So this also allows the time alignment of the full frequency range.
Oh, cool. And that for a long time, I thought that was the top dog, but there is actually a huge like floor to ceiling one that has 2 of those on top of each other. I did see it about, I think, 2 shows in my lifetime. Also a stunner, but this is, I feel like I can only see that next to the fireplace of a sultan. How many of those giant displays do you guys sell a year?
So you're referring to the 101 Extreme version of the loudspeaker, which has in the Omni section, it's a 4-tower system, and the 2 of the towers are the Omni drivers. So you have a complement of the radio mid-range tweeter woofer on the lower section, and then flipped upside down in a mirror array Diapolito configuration, you have another tweeter mid-range woofer. So this allows a much larger soundstage. It increases the efficiency of the system, and it has a much better horizontal projection character than the 101E, the smaller little brother, has. And then you have separate woofer columns. There's 3 subwoofers, cabinets stacked on top of one another on each channel. And this is where our push-push bass system was developed in the research of the 101 Extreme. So this has 2 times 12-inch double aluminum membrane cone drivers built to our spec that are working in this push-push principle with massive aluminum rods connecting the baskets all around. So again, they cancel each other's negative force, and you have this 180 degrees radiation on either side. And the subwoofers are active, so you are able to control them independently. The relative volume, the group delay, so you can space the woofers where you need to, and then you can synchronize them in time with the Omni tower, so that if you have a view that you don't want to obstruct, or you want to put you find the better bass responses close to the corners oftentimes, the best reinforcement, so you can put them where they optimize. And then the Omni tower, you can move where you find the best imaging and spatial characteristics that you're looking for. That system has 26 total drivers, weighs about with the amplifiers over 3,500 pounds.
Have you ever installed one where you're like, I don't know if the floor is going to hold this way?
This is something that we always discuss with a potential customer, because it is an extreme amount of weight.
It's not spiked, is it?
No.
I would just go right through the floor
because each tower weighs about 600 pounds when built. So you build it in place. It comes in 10 very large pieces between 200 and 300 pounds a piece, and you literally stack build these things in place.
So how do you adjust for toe in? There's no toe in. You just how do you adjust for sound once if it's that heavy? Are you able to move it?
The Omni portion is on some very, very heavy casters.
Oh, casters.
So you can kind of roll it. It's actually pretty amazing that it weighs 600 pounds and you're able to move it, even small movements. And then once you find your spot, you lock it down with spikes, which lifts it off get the bearings off the floor.
Sounds well thought out.
Yeah. That one is a special experience if you ever get to hear it. It's pretty cool. And actually, in celebration of a nice review we had from another magazine, we're doing a little road show with the 101 Extreme system because it's not seen very often, and it's not realistic for most dealers to have such an expensive and large system taking up a lot of their valuable retail space. So we're going to move it around for a month or 2 at a time at several dealers around the country.
That's fun.
So we'll be doing dealer events events and shows and things like that at the different stops on the road show. So you can check our website for the latest dates and locations of that.
Do you find that a particular geographic region in the let's just stick with the U.S. because that's where I'm familiar with, is drawn to this type of product, or at least the extreme version, or is it all? It's just anywhere, any big city has a couple of these.
Yeah, that, like you said, there's first of all, the reality is that it has to be a pretty wealthy customer to afford something. The large extreme system is about over $500,000 just for the MBL equipment. Then you need 6 channels of cables, interconnects, and it gets kind of absurdly expensive very, very quickly. Yeah. So that the air is pretty thin up there in terms of everybody wants it, but who could actually pull the trigger? So the U.S. has a lot of very wealthy people, and there seems to be pockets all over the country, even in places you wouldn't necessarily think. We have customers all over North America, really all over the world, but I'm the North American office for the company.
I have to ask you, has there ever been a scenario where you had one customer come in and buy it, and then his buddy comes in like 2 weeks later, be like, Mike, this XYZ got it, and I got to have it too?
Yes.
That has happened?
It has, yeah. And also kind of, I don't know if it's strange or disturbing or what, but oftentimes people who are fortunate enough to have an extreme system, they have more than one of them. Whether in different rooms in the home or in different homes, the same owner.
That's unexpected, but I guess not really. I think it's fun because I was earlier in my career, I used to ask, what sells this thing to a lot of dealers. I'm a dealer, they really work in the retail experience. And one of the guys had said to me, the number one thing that I get is a guy will come in and be like, my buddy has this thing, I want the one right above it. Yeah. That was a very common motivation for these people to spend the dollar or to justify it. So I asked that, and I actually don't find that to be so surprising. But it's just a fun little thing about humans that, once you get to that point on your monetary thing, these are the things that you kind of think about.
It's interesting. The Extreme is coming about 10 years old now. In production. And I believe you asked me how many were actually made. I didn't answer your question. We can make between 1 and 2 pairs a month. It's a very intensive process. All the drive units are built by hand. This is not something you go buy at Radio Shack. So it takes quite a long time. And the most skilled, with the most experience building the drivers, they're the ones who put the Extreme together. So we can make 1 to 2 of those a month. Mm-hmm. And then the speaker's been in production about 10 years. So you can do the math. They're always sold. Sometimes you get lucky and there's a pair being made that's available to you as a distributor, and sometimes you could wait up to a year for an Extreme system.
Do they come in different colors, or is it just one color?
The standard finish is piano black lacquer or a white lacquer with chrome or gold little accent pieces, but we can match any RAL paint code. So if you want to match your Ferrari or your Porsche or the drapes or the couch or whichever you like, you can do the complete system in that color, the electronics, everything. It's pretty sharp. We've done orange and hot pink and chrome and all different crazy combinations. You can also wrap in leather. The cabinets can be wrapped in leather with contrast stitching if you want on the corners. And there's really a lot of customizable options for the larger products, for sure.
So you did bring up the fact that we've been talking about the drivers, but you guys do make end-to-end electronics. Is all that stuff made in Germany?
Yes, sir. We have a factory just outside of Berlin. So if any of your listeners are ever in Berlin, we have a beautiful showroom in the shopping district in Berlin where anyone can go anytime and experience all of the MBL product line. And then you can also have a tour of our factory. We have an actual real factory, which is a little bit unusual in our industry. We're vertically integrated. We manufacture everything in-house. The only things that we don't do are the metal plating of the trim parts and the lacquer cabinetry, because these are specialties that are done better by someone else. And then we have 2 sides to the factory, a machine shop that's CNC equipment and a lot of high-tech tools that are manufacturing the chassis parts, for example, for the amplifiers or the magnet housing and the structure for the Omni drivers. And then we have a clean side where the drivers are being built for the loudspeakers, and also surface mount devices are being built onto the circuit boards, and the electronics are being put together.
That's really interesting. And I want to pause for a moment and just recognize that I don't think I've ever heard of a manufacturer that will custom paint your your front end components. That's the first time I've ever heard that. I find that one little passing moment to be kind of a fun little thing. It's like you could. It seems like you could probably pay anybody to do it, but the fact that you guys is one of the services that you offer to match the whole thing. I think it just really emphasizes that aside from being a great sounding system, this is a talking piece. It is eye candy at its purest form in terms of audio. So to have it all match in a unique color, I think
one remote control.
One remote control, and it is pretty cool. I saw it yesterday. Is that a new remote control? Or has it always been in that circular design?
That circular design is we have 3 different lines of electronics. So our Corona line is the beginning of the products, and the Noble line is the middle product, and the reference line is the top line products. So we're always evolving and upgrading, updating each product line. So we've done the Corona line, and now the Noble line is the most recent to have been refreshed and completely redone. So this round remote that you're talking about is for the Noble line, and it has a volume ring kind of on the outside of the circle that you can turn to like a volume knob, and it's backlit. It's a nice remote. We manufacture that remote in-house. It's machined from a billet of aluminum. It has a nice weight to it.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Now, the component line has been updated. Has the mainstay of the driver line been updated as well, or has it been the same for 10 years?
The drivers are always evolving. There's a lot of unique materials and some proprietary materials in here, and suppliers and chemistry are constantly changing. And this is a very difficult sort of moving target for us to hit because, like I said, these drivers are all built in-house by hand. The carbon pieces are cut and formed, and different processes along the way are done. So when the material suppliers change, we have to kind of evolve and move around. This is common to every manufacturer, but it's, I think, highlighted a little bit more by us because of the nature of the way that we build the drivers. It's very hand-intensive. The tweeter, for example, takes 20 man-hours to get it to a point where it can be tested enough to see if will perform within our parameters that are acceptable, and 60% go in the trash after that point.
Did we speak to what the material is in each one?
No, we didn't. The tweeter has 24 individual segments. It's a straight carbon material that's thin like paper.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the mid-range driver.
Carbon material.
It's a straight carbon. You can see it.
Okay.
It's linear. It's not like a woven or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the mid-range driver has
is it carbon
a
fiber?
woven carbon fiber segment. You can see it's quite a bit. The segments are quite a bit thicker and beefier because they're moving, more in the air gap, and they're pushing more air because of the frequency range they're playing. And then on the 101, the Omni woofer is made of an alloy of magnesium, silicone, and aluminum. It's like a jet plane wing material.
And it's polished to a beautiful shine. It just looks glorious when because I'm always looking at it in the room, and it's like it vibrates slightly. It's not like pounding in and out, that one, but the look, the shine, the visual presentation is well done on that. And it sounds like at this level that would be something that you would assume happens, but it does not always happen in high fidelity. I mean, you can buy, unfortunately, I think you can buy more than one $20,000-$30,000 speaker that does not look this appealing. I'm just saying.
That's an interesting point. With the Omni system, the mid-range tweeter and woofer on some of the models, this is kind of a pure Bauhaus expression. These drivers and this speaker has to look exactly the way it does or it will not function. So it's almost kind of a happy accident that it looks interesting and attractive to most people, but it has to look that way. It has to be that silver color of the woofer. It can't be painted or anodized or anything. This will change the way that it performs. Wow.
So are you guys, the designers, do they continue to experiment with different materials for these bands?
Constantly in evolution. The drive units are, I believe, about the fifth generation, full generation change since we started in 1979.
We kind of talked about where you guys came from, what's been going on. What do you kind of look at it might come down in the future? Do you see any radical changes in design, or do you think that it might just be this tinkering of material types and the basic thing is what MBL will always be?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the core of the company, the foundation of the company is this omnidirectional loudspeaker technology. So that's obviously for us very important. It's also unique in the world. There's nothing like it in that sense. So we do constantly research and development on this technology, and new speakers, refreshed speakers will come down the line, as the years come by. It's kind of an old-fashioned company. Like I said, we're vertically integrated. We do most in-house, and also very slow to change the products. We like to have very long product lines. We have distributors in over 45 countries in the world, and people are much more feel more stable and confident in the brand if you're not constantly evolving. Some other manufacturers, as we know, almost every year it seems, have a completely refreshed, replaced product line that is superior to the one from last year, and we don't roll like that.
I think it happens at every price point, but more so at the budget kind of statement line. And those, it is absolutely true. People have sat across from me at a table just like this and said, we have to do something new every year, so we give them something to talk about. So it does happen, but this is a different thing. And I like that. I think that it is putting all your weight on the fact that the product is unique and exceptional, and not just because it's the newest thing is there. And you could do that at this price point too, but it is. It is a unique thing. So now, has no one else? There's no other companies that make anything like this?
No, there are a few other manufacturers over the years who have made quasi omnidirectional loudspeakers, but the only thing that they share with us is a similar radiation pattern.
Yeah,
most of these other attempts are conventional cone drivers that are firing into some kind of conical diffuser. Mm-hmm. So this is an actual pulsating sphere. Those are the drivers. There's no cabinet. It just the drive units. This is either moving or it's not moving. It's like a cymbal. It's either making sound or it's not making sound. Mm-hmm. And because the segments are small, but there's many of them, they can move very, very, very quickly because the membranes are so small, but they are able to deliver a weight and a dimensionality because there are so many of them, and because it uses the room to build pressure. It's not using a box to build the pressure and then a driver that beams this energy at you, or some speakers, it doesn't seem that the energy ever leaves the box.
Yeah.
But with MBL, that's what it's all about. Energy is exciting the room, exciting the listener, and really giving you more of a tactile, emotional experience with the music rather than a cerebral one where you're sitting and you have to be in this perfect triangle and you can't move one side or the other, or the whole soundstage collapses. You can only listen pretty much one person at a time, or you have to sit in a row and always offer to swap around in the sweet spot. There's a lot of shuffling going around in a lot of these exhibits. And I'm trying to show that you can have a great experience anywhere in the room. So we often have people sitting off in the corner, and even if there's sweet spot seats available, people don't move. They're just having a nice experience where they're at. So the another reason for this impactful sound, especially in the treble, this is one thing that really baffles a lot of people, is how there's so much presence but impact as well in the treble. So if you took the radiating surface area of the tweeter, for example, it's about a 2.5-inch dome tweeter. Would be the equivalent radiating area. The mid-range driver is about a 7.5-inch mid-range cone, and the Omni woofer is about a 21-inch cone surface area with a 6-inch voice coil. So it has this ability to really give you a texture and a tapping that you get pressure hitting you from large bass kick drums and things like that.
It's just moving a lot of air.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's moving a lot
That's what it's
more
all about.
air. Yeah.
It's all about moving the air.
So the drivers, they're very unique in the way they're designed. Do they need different types of amplification to get to sound their best?
So there's nothing special in that sense about any MBL product. It's not a closed system.
Okay.
So yes, we do make electronics, and they are all designed by the same chief engineer, Jürgen Reis, I described earlier. So you do get a house sound and a certain synergy with the components and the loudspeakers together, but it's not closed. So you don't have to use MBL electronics with MBL speakers and vice versa. The drivers themselves are sort of naked. They're not in this box to build pressure with. So they're building pressure in the room. So The efficiency rating on this sort of 1 watt, 1 meter away in an anechoic chamber, this is kind of the industry standard for efficiency ratings. This really doesn't apply in any way to an omnidirectional loudspeaker because it's only measuring the forward radiation with zero reflectivity at all. And that's kind of the inverse of how our speaker works. We're giving direct and reflected sound everywhere. So on this 1 watt, 1 meter rating, it's on the low side in the low 80s of that number.
Okay.
But the in-room pressure, we don't listen in an anechoic chamber. At least most people don't. So in-room pressure sensitivity is actually far greater with this type of system because of the way it excites the room.
So you can run it off an amplifier, but is there any special requirements, or are your amplifiers designed in a special way to complement that?
No,
very powerful.
yeah. They're like I said, many people use our electronics with other manufacturers' loudspeakers. Sure. Yeah, really good matches with many electronics, and because they're robust and they have to be able to drive first. An MBL loudspeaker, they can pretty much handle any other loudspeaker load. The speakers are 4 ohms impedance and relatively benign in terms of impedance, but you do need some current and some power to control the drivers to build the pressure in the room. This is all going to depend also on the reflectivity and reverberation time of the room that the loudspeaker's in. So if the room is overdamped and you kind of have to raise your voice to hear anything in there, then you're going to have to feed the speaker more power because the room is absorbing the energy. And conversely, if the room is more reverberant on the liver side, then the room is going to lift the sound pressure naturally, and you wouldn't need as much power.
So just to get into the weeds a little bit, what is the wattage rating at you said they're 4 ohms?
Yes.
At 4 ohms for the 101 with the amps that you pair at the show. What do you usually go within that scenario?
The 101, the hardest driver to load for an amplifier is certainly the bass drivers, and the Omni woofer, as we described, is a very large driver with a 6-inch voice coil. So it's very demanding on an amplifier. So we recommend typically 350 watts at a 4 ohm rating from a solid state amplifier or the tube equivalent.
So it does do tubes.
Sure.
Is the MBL stuff tube?
No. Our electronics are all solid state.
Okay.
We do like the tube sound, and that's sort of our design goal, is to sound like kind of a tube, a little bit warm, a little bit beautiful, very, very liquid mid-range. But we want to have these long product lines and consistency across, and with tubes, that's not so easy in manufacturing.
But it is possible to run it with a powerful tube amp?
Oh, absolutely. We have many customers, and I've heard fantastic sound from large tube amps driving the 101s.
Also very cheap.
Yeah,
large, powerful tube amps, no problem.
The smaller speakers, there's two, the 126 and then the 120, 12,000 a pair and 21,000 a pair retail. They're three-way. They can be stand-mounted, they can be hung upside down, or they can sit on a shelf. Those speakers we recommend 150 watts at 4 ohms of solid-state power.
Okay.
So our Corona line, our entry-level electronics, are our first generation of output switching amplifiers with linear analog switching and linear power supplies. So they're super efficient, but the power rating's about 300 watts per channel. In our entry-level integrated at 4 ohms. So there's many amplifiers available now in the market that are good quality and have some power to them. Actually, one time at a reviewer, just going back from the Absolute Sound, named Michael Gindy, he was the first writer to really write a review about the 101. This is going back into the 80s, and he called it the accordion from Mars. But I was at his home one day, and he was conversely reviewing a very efficient loudspeaker with some Flea Power 300B amplifier. So we said, well, let's try it on the 101. So it was a whisper, but it was a very beautiful whisper.
So those who do want to dip your toe in this technology, if you're really intrigued about it, there is a stand mount that starts at around, you said $11,000-$12,000.
Yeah, $11,800.
And you can run it from a regular amplifier. So it isn't just aspirational. I know 10,000 is still a lot for people, but in the greater sense of hi-fi, a stand mount at 10,000 is is an arena that more than one company plays in. So that'd be a fun way to kind of get it. And at that size, you said it's a 3-way design.
It is.
Yeah.
It has 2 5.5-inch cones, as I was describing.
That's still
push radiation. So the smallest speaker plays down to about 50 hertz in the room, and then the next step up, the 120, has 2 7-inch drivers on the sides and twice the cabinet volume of the 126. So he plays louder and he'll fill a bigger room. He plays down to about 40 hertz in the room. Then you move into a floor standard, a 4-way. The 116 is 32,000 a pair. So here you have the same radial tweeter mid-range, 2 5.5-inch mid-bass drivers, and then 2 8-inch woofers at the lower part of the cabinet. And then there's a 111 is the next step, who has 2 times 10-inch woofers and is a full-range loudspeaker. And then you move to the 101. So there's some gaps, logical gaps in there that we're working to fill. There's a huge jump between the 101E Mark II at $70,000 a pair, and the 101 Extreme is $263,000. So there's some space in there to be filled, which we're addressing.
Very cool. I'm still waiting for that $1,000 speaker to come from you.
Yeah.
Maybe just the top part. Can I just get this top part?
Yeah.
We
all want that.
Thanks so much for coming on, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the Occasional Podcast Season 4. The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes parttimeaudiophile.com, the Occasional Magazine, the PTA newsletter, and audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Bryan Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.